New York City, 1887. A young reporter stares at the towering gates of Blackwell's Island Asylum. In a few moments, she will convince everyone inside that she has lost her mind, and she has no guarantee she'll ever be allowed to leave. Her name was Nellie Bly. At 23, she had been hired by the New York World, an investigative tabloid newspaper owned by Joseph Pulitzer, to be one of their undercover journalists. The World, as Nellie called it, asked her to go undercover to investigate claims of abuse and cruelty in one of New York's Asylum for the Insane. She asked her editor, "How will you get me out after I once get in?" His answer wasn't very comforting. "I do not know, but we will get you out, if we have to tell who you are and for what purpose you feigned insanity. Only get in." She later turned her article, 10 Days in a Madhouse, into a book in which she described her whole experience. So how did Nellie Bly convince the people around her that she was insane? She first needed to prepare herself so she could play the part of an insane person. She needed to convince people that her insanity was real and hope someone would call the men in the white coats who would take her to the insane asylum. Obviously, she couldn't go there as a journalist. She needed a new identity. She decided on a new name, Nellie Brown. She also would portray herself as an unfortunate crazy girl. The temporary home for females, located in New York City, would become her home for 30 cents a night till she convinced several women staying there that she was insane. She knew that she would be committed to the women's lunatic asylum on Blackwell Island from this location. This asylum was exactly where she wanted to go, as it had the reputation as the most infamous and opaque public asylum in New York City. She wrote, "I knew, if once I made a house full of women believe me crazy, that they would never rest until I was out of their reach and in secure quarters." The boarding house was gloomy, and the food was less than palatable. Nellie's heart went out to the honest women who worked all day and had to call this place home. After dinner, she began to act erratic. Unsettling remarks, blank stares, and she refused to sleep. This worked exactly as she'd hoped. A few boarders were scared of her and thought she might do them harm. Some couldn't sleep while she was there, and one even had a nightmare about her. They grew alarmed and called the police. Doctor after doctor examined her for only a few minutes before confidently declaring her insane. No one questioned whether they might be wrong. When asked what drugs she was on, she answered, "I don't know what drugs are." Then it was time to see the judge who would make the final decision. Judge Duffy declared Nellie Brown insane and told the police officers to tell the workers at Bellevue to be kind to her. They spent little time before declaring her insane. Definitely shows how flawed the system was in the 1800s. She was told that she would have a carriage ride and then be allowed to go home. She knew this was a lie, and that she would be on her way to the insane ward at Bellevue Hospital. She stayed at Bellevue Hospital that night into the next morning. It was stark white, and at the end of the hall there were large doors that were padlocked closed. She was constantly being questioned by doctor after doctor, who all declared her to be insane as well. The next day she was loaded into an ambulance and on her way to the ferry boat for her voyage to the Women's Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell Island. She had succeeded. She had fooled the police, the judges, and the doctors. But now came the part she couldn't control. For the next 10 days, her life would be in the hands of the very people she had come to investigate. The asylum was extremely overcrowded, Nellie realized. That not only were the mental ill housed at the asylum, there were many women who were there just society didn't want to be bothered with them. They were not insane. They were foreign or poor or had behavior problems. The rooms were cold, and patients were given thin clothing despite cold conditions. Not only were patients freezing, but they were hungry due to being given inadequate, sometimes spoiled food. Ice-cold bath rituals were shared among many patients using the same dirty water. No one was allowed to go outside on their own. Patients were tied together with rope for outdoor walks. The nurses were neglectful or even outright cruel. Patients were verbally abused and endured rough handling. In the whole asylum she found just one caring, gentle doctor she will never forget. Once she was admitted into the asylum as a patient, she stopped acting insane. What was complexing to Nellie was, once a patient was classified as insane, it was impossible to remove the title. The greatest irony shocked Nellie. Once she stopped pretending to be insane and behaved completely normally, the doctors became even more convinced that she belonged there. Just constant repetition, day after day for the patients. The same cold meals, the same harsh routines, the same forced silence, each day blurring into the next. Nellie experienced physical and emotional toll. She had to keep reminding herself that her rescue was coming. Other, perfectly sane people in the asylum had nothing to look forward to. After 10 days, a lawyer was sent by the World newspaper to secure Nellie Bly's release. When she finally was released, she had mixed emotions. She left with pleasure and regret. She called her release the free breath of heaven. As the ferry carried her away from Blackwell's Island, Nellie looked back, knowing dozens of women she believed were perfectly sane remained trapped behind its walls. She could leave, they could not. Nellie Bly immediately wrote an article about her trip into insanity and life at the lunatic asylum for her newspaper, 10 Days in a Madhouse. When the newspapers hit the street, the public reacted with growing outrage. She published a book with the same name. In the end of her stay at the madhouse culminated in a grand jury investigation. City officials could no longer ignore what she had uncovered. Because of Nellie's exposure, New York City increased their funding to $1 million per year, which Nellie took great pride in, knowing it was because of her investigative work and publications. I have at least the satisfaction of knowing that the poor, unfortunate ones will be better cared for because of my work. She became one of America's first and most famous undercover investigative journalists. From the madhouse to around the world. She wasn't finished making history. In 1889, Nellie Bly had something totally different for her next adventure. After reading a novel by Jules Vernon, Around the World in 80 Days, Nellie proposed an extraordinary challenge to her newspaper. She wanted to bring Jules Vernon's fiction to reality by going around the world in even less time. She did it in only 72 days, 6 hours, and 11 minutes. She became an international celebrity. She packed everything she needed for a journey around the globe into one small handbag. Many people believe no woman could travel alone. Nellie intended to prove them wrong. Nellie boarded a steamship and began a journey that captivated readers around the world. She crossed oceans by steamship, traveled across continents by train, battled storms, missed connections, and raced against the clock. Along the way, she even stopped in France to meet the author whose novel had inspired her, Jules Vernon himself. Verne reportedly told her he had never imagined anyone would actually beat the journey from his novel. Newspapers published regular updates, and millions of readers eagerly followed her progress. More importantly, She had once again proved that women were capable of accomplishing feats many believed impossible. Whether exposing injustice inside an asylum or racing around the world, Nellie Bly refused to accept the limits society placed on women. The young woman who walked willingly through the gates of a notorious asylum returned to the world a changed person, but she also changed the world around her. She didn't just report history, she made it. For more information about Nellie Bly, you can read her 2 books on these subjects called Around the World in 72 Days and 10 Days in a Madhouse, both written by Nellie herself. If this story inspired you, join us as we continue uncovering the lives of women who changed the world. Subscribe to Heroines of History and keep the light of history alive. And let us know in the comments who your favorite heroine is. Bye for now.